A portion of today's video is sponsored by Just Meats. The Switch just recently hit its 7th year anniversary, and as we enter its 8th year, as well as having all kinds of swirling rumors about what Nintendo's next hardware may or may not be, an important question that just keeps heating up more and more as time passes is it worth buying a Switch right now? I actually made a video on this subject a year ago, or not even actually a full year ago, and in the time that has passed since then, a lot of different circumstances of things have changed to where, what I said back then isn't really true anymore in 2024, and while I think there are some great reasons to still pick up a system right now if you want to, I'm leaning a little bit more towards right now, maybe you want to hold off. Let's talk about the reasons why. First off, one of the big things is of course the fact that because the Switch is hitting the age it is, there is that question of what Nintendo's next hardware is going to be. And there's two very important questions about that next hardware. One, when does it release exactly? And two, will it be backwards compatible with the current Switch library? Now, for that first question, we actually have a decent amount of, I wouldn't necessarily call them leaks, but rumors and industry reports and things that people have heard that indicates that more than likely the system is coming out early next year. For a while we were hearing late 2024, but then earlier this year there were a lot of reports stating that it sounds like Nintendo is letting their devs know, hey, we're actually going to be delaying it into early 25 because we need to get that opening software library polished up and ready to go for when the system releases. And the tricky thing about this is, of course, that right now this is still all entirely just rumor and hearsay. Nintendo themselves have made no official statement about what they're doing next. There's been some kind of light hinting that yes, of course, they are working on some new hardware and that they do have future plans, but nothing actually concrete has been said about what the next system is going to be or when it's going to release. That said, early 25 makes sense for a few different reasons. Obviously, that is a fairly long lifespan for the Switch. That'd be basically a full 8 years, depending on when the next system comes out, which for their home consoles is a stretch, but by handheld standards, not too much longer. You look at things like the DS or the Game Boy, those had fairly long lifespans. That means that starting from right now, there is roughly a full year left of waiting for this next bit of hardware. And so an important question worth considering is, if you've waited this long to pick up a Switch, or for whatever reason you're just in the market for getting one, is it worth spending $200 to $350 on a brand new system if it's possibly going to be irrelevant in the next year? Now, of course, the other important thing here about whether or not that makes the current system irrelevant is the next system going to actually be backwards compatible? And regrettably, there's not as much great evidence or rumors for this fact. I would certainly say that the vast majority of people want it to be backwards compatible. We do have a lot of indications and signs that the next system is going to be a direct successor to the Switch in a sense. I, for one, always thought there was the chance that Nintendo could really try to come out of left field and do something different because at the end of the day, Nintendo does what Nintendo wants to do. But there is also a tendency in history for them to do systems in pairs, Nintendo to Super Nintendo, Game Boy to Game Boy Advance, DS to 3DS, and so something like Switch to whatever the next system is called, Switch 2, Super Switch, whatever Nintendo ends up calling it, makes sense. And if it is a direct successor, it's pretty logical to assume, or at least hope, that it would support the back Switch library, especially considering how very large it is. And still growing, might I add. We already know a number of games coming out for the Switch the first half of this year. We just got confirmed release dates for Luigi's Mansion 2 HD and the Paper Mario Thousand Year Door remake, which are both coming out before the first half of the year ends, which also raises the question of, well, if all that's coming out by then, does Nintendo have plans for the back half of the year, things they want to fill the schedule with until a new system releases? There are some games we're still waiting on news from that we haven't heard from in a while, like Metroid Prime 4. And even without focusing on those first-party games, there's a lot of third-party support coming to the Switch, either with games that are exclusive to the system, like the upcoming RPG from Level 5 Deca Police, or games that are multi-platform, but kind of feel right on Switch in some ways. A great example being Unicorn Overlord, which just released, I'm in love with, and while yeah, you can play that on PlayStation and Xbox perfectly fine, it's able to run very smoothly on the Switch, and thus feels like a really appropriate fit because you're still hitting high frame rates while getting the benefits of things like being able to play on the go. Also, just a quick shout out about that game. While I have not actually posted a full review of it yet, I did do some in-depth thoughts on the demo that are a very large chunk of the game. I'm working my way through the rest of it right now to share more thoughts on it. But if you want to see those thoughts, it's actually over on my side channel, Next Side Quest. Make sure to check it out over there. It also just helps that Unicorn Overlord's approach to art style is just gorgeous, and so it's able to be supported on older hardware very well, and still get great looking images like the always incredibly delicious looking Vanillaware food. Which, real quick by the way, since I'm talking cooking meat in a game, let's take a moment to thank today's sponsor, Just Meats. I've been working on eating healthier, not having junk all the time, and it's tough to always have the time and energy available to cook stuff from scratch. And that's where Just Meats has become really helpful, giving me an easy way of having a main protein that's ready to go. They offer a variety of delicious pre-cooked meat that's not only humanely sourced and nutritionally focused, but also really easy to prepare in just 2 minutes. All it takes is open up the package, throw it on a skillet, add a little juice that they send you as well, let it warm up for 2 minutes, and you are ready to eat. They've got beef, chicken, pork, and turkey options, with new things becoming available all the time, like their recent ground beef chuck and roasted diced chicken. One of my personal favorites that I've had so far is their carne asada. If you want to try out Just Meats, make sure to use my coupon code KENSON15 to get $15 off your first order, and even better, that $15 off stacks with their other offers, including their standard 25% off your first subscription order. Check out the link down below in the description to get started today. So, going back to the Switch, looking at what evidence is just currently out there and what reports we have to go off of, I would say a educated guess on the current flow of things is we have a year left of the regular Switch being the main system Nintendo is working on, with a new system coming out in early 25, and there is a, I think, decent likelihood that that system is going to be backwards compatible. Sadly, we just don't have a hard answer yet on whether it will be or not. And if it is, that makes getting a Switch right now a lot less appealing. Thankfully, when you're looking at the price point of different systems out there on the market, Nintendo is one of the more affordable systems, relatively speaking. And so the idea of investing in one for a year to just play a ton and get ready for next system, I don't think is entirely out of the question, again, because the library there is so excellent. And hopefully, if the next system is backwards compatible, there would also be some kind of system for migrating your information from the current Switch over to it. If not, that's going to be a little bit of a headache. But even then, I think there is still grounds for, look, if you buy a Switch right now because you've just waited this long and you want to get access to the library, this moment there's some particular game you want to grab on it and you want to play and experience it and not have to wait a whole year for it, I absolutely think that is a valid choice. But as far as just if you're just debating whether or not it actually is worth doing, personally right now I'm leaning a lot more towards not really. Yes, there is the chance that the next system is not backwards compatible, and so you need to get a Switch anyways to access a lot of that library, aside from anything that ends up getting ported or, released cross-gen. But even in that case, all you really end up losing on is time, right? I mean, there's always that FOMO feeling of you should just get a system right now because that's what sounds good to you. But if it ends up being that the Switch ends up maintaining being a system where you need to get it to maintain its library alive, you could buy one later when the next system comes out. Yeah, it's probably going to end up getting phased out over time slowly, but not immediately dropped. After all, the 3DS was kept alive for a good couple years after the Switch released in 2017. I think another thing worth pointing out as well that's a bit of a different market, and yes, this depends on how much you're willing to spend right now, but there is also a lot more competition to the Switch these days as far as just handheld options out there. When the Switch first came out, it was really the one handheld in town. There wasn't a whole lot going on. Sony had dropped the Vita. Yeah, there's the mobile game market, but that's not really the exact same thing. And now, while we're not seeing a lot of first-party handheld devices from people like Xbox or PlayStation, unless you want to count the Portal, what we have seen a boom in is PC handhelds. Steam Deck, ROG Ally, Lenovo Legion Go, MSI Claw, all of these are handheld gaming options that you could potentially choose to get over grabbing a Switch right now, especially if Nintendo is going to be launching something later on. If a particular game is available across all of these systems, you're going to likely see better performance on these PC handhelds versus what the Switch is capable of, even when it's extremely well optimized. Albeit, yes, at a higher buy-in price point, but something that I think at this point is probably going to last you longer than the Switch if it's going to get replaced in the next year. Now, of course, the big problem with one of these devices versus a Nintendo Switch is that they're not Nintendo systems, and so while they might be something that's more up-to-date for running modern games, they don't have the first-party library, which is oftentimes what I feel is actually the thing appealing to a lot of people when it comes to Nintendo systems, which is a valid concern. But that's also where we come back to the whole reason why we're even talking about this, whether or not Nintendo releases new hardware next year. My main point really is just that if you're interested in getting a gaming handheld because you want a portable option to play games and you're not necessarily fixated specifically on Nintendo things, yes, the buy-in price is a little higher, but even when looking at things like the introductory version of the Steam Deck is, in my mind, a smarter investment right now, just because that system, I think, is going to continue to get support a bit longer, whereas the Switch, yeah, there's more software coming out and there's more things to be excited in, but the hardware itself likely getting outclassed in the next year. And this can end up putting you in the position of, getting a PC handheld right now to play what games you have on your Steam library, pick up some stuff that is exclusive to PC, enjoy the amount of content that's available there, and then in a year, when Nintendo drops whatever that system is, that can be your first-party Nintendo machine. All that said, one piece of advice I did give last year is that if you really want to get a Nintendo first-party machine and you don't want to spend that much money because you are likely to just end up upgrading the next system next year anyways, one option, not the absolute best, but one option is to just pick up a Switch Lite for now. It is not necessarily the objectively best way to play Switch games because it can't be docked and it lacks the very shiny OLED display of the Switch OLED edition, but it's also a considerably cheaper model, going for $200 as opposed to $300 or $350. And even cheaper if you're going the route of something like picking up a used one just because you need to have a system for the time being. Look, if you watch my channel for any period of time, you'll know that I'm a fan of the Nintendo Switch. I mean, hell, out of the three main traditional console manufacturers, it's probably actually my favorite and the one that I've used the most. But just looking at the current market trend and the fact that there is and how likely we are to see something new come out in the near future, I just don't think right now is the best time to jump on one unless you take one of those measures of just not spending quite as much. Because if you get one right now, I just think there's a very good chance that in the next year, you're gonna have to throw down the same price point, if not even more, all over again to get the brand new system that's going to play the same library, but even more, possibly even running some of those games even better, on top of whatever new stuff Nintendo has lined up for it. Because it clearly sounds like, at least based on the reports, they want to have a strong opening library for it, which is going to increase that FOMO feeling of wanting to pick up the next system right away whenever it releases. So that's just my 2 cents on whether or not it's worth picking up a Switch as we are seeing its likely final year. I don't think it's the worst decision you could ever make. If you've got the money to throw down and you want to play games you've been missing on up until now, it's a solid choice, but there's just, I think, enough good reasons now to maybe just try to have a little bit of patience. As always, if you enjoyed the video and found it useful, hit the thumbs up button to let me know. Subscribe if you haven't yet, and I will see you guys later.